Hello and a happy Wednesday to you all. So per usual, I just would love to check that you can hear me. I can see there's a few of you there at the moment. So if you could just type for me that you can hear me, that would be awesome. I'm just having a look at LinkedIn to see if LinkedIn is working. It appears to be. So say hello. Let me know you can hear me. I'll say hello to myself on LinkedIn. Hey, Mohab, how are you doing? Thank you. So hello myself. I shall write on LinkedIn just to make sure that's working. See what the time delay is. Okay. So yes, I'm Paul at the weekends. All right. Not really. All right, cool. So there's a few of you there. That's awesome. Right, so it does always take people a little bit of time to arrive, so I have to fill that time. So I like to fill that time by saying hello, finding out where everybody is coming from. I will apologize up front. I'm guessing it's a bit echoey, the sound at your end. I'm redecorating my house. Actually, most of the paint's come off now, but I was covered in paint not so long ago. I'm redecorating my house, so I've had to move my desk and move all the furniture. So it's probably really echoey in my office. So I am really, really sorry if it sounds rubbish. I usually have loads of furniture and stuff in here. So apologies in advance for that. Oh, the sound is great. Good. That's rare. I struggle with sound so much. It's the hardest thing of all of this stuff. Right. So let me say hello. I can see a couple of familiar faces, which is always nice. So Mahab, welcome. We have Del. Let me know where you're coming in from as well. I had someone from Finland on Monday, which was super exciting. I've never had anyone from Finland before. Faraz, welcome. Thank you for joining. Again, please let me know where you're coming from. Jay Pafford, welcome back. How are you doing? Excited to see you again. We have Michelle Lowe. Hello, Michelle. And we have a LinkedIn user. Excellent. Please do let me know where you're coming from. I love to hear that. It's one of my favorite bits. I hear places that I've never been to before. Now, Del, you're challenging me there because I'm very bad at the little shortenings of the US states. So WA, Washington. I'm sorry, I'm going to embarrass myself. Jay Pafford, you are live from Colorado. Oh, I love Colorado. Washington, I was right. Yay! I love Colorado, Jay Pafford. I went through there very briefly on my way to New Zealand many, many decades ago. I stopped in Denver and the view was just mind-blowing. As I said, it's about 20 years ago, maybe even 30 now I think about it. It was amazing. I can't wait to go back to Colorado. London, excellent. Up the Brits. And Seattle, I'm a big fan of Seattle, as you can imagine, working in Amazon. I got to visit there quite a lot. So that is absolutely awesome. Lovely. So we have quite a range. Not many Europeans today, I don't think. We usually have a good contingent for kind of Germany or Spain. All right. So why don't we get going and then we will see. Rio. Awesome. Fabulous. I have a friend in Rio. Very, very cool. Somewhere else I would absolutely love to go. Excellent. Cool. Delighted. Maybe you're the first person from Rio. I'm not sure. Anyway, great to have you here. Let's get going. So I am Gigi, as you probably know. And I am definitely the Amazon interview whiz. I worked at Amazon for years. And whilst I was there, like every single Amazonian, I did a lot of interviewing, but most particularly and relevant to you, I was a bar raiser. As a bar raiser, I was lucky enough to be able to interview across tech and non-tech, all sorts of different job families and all different countries as well. Don't think I ever did an interview in Brazil, but I think I did an interview across at least 10 different countries in my time, which is awesome because in the main, if you're interviewing at Amazon, you'll only interview within your own kind of technical sphere. So if you're a finance person, you'll generally only interview finance people, or if you're a recruiter, you're only going to be working in your specific area of expertise. Whereas if you're a bar raiser, you get to cover pretty much anything and everything. So I have seen it all, and I have hired hundreds of Amazonians in my time, and therefore I know exactly what it takes to get hired at Amazon. So I now run my own Amazon interview preparation kind of empire, smallest empire you'll ever see. And my mission is to make Amazon interview expertise accessible to everybody. Because one thing I discovered when I was bar raising was quite how much one-to-one interview preparation costs. And it's not cheap. And if you think about the amount of hours you're going to need to put into preparing for an Amazon interview, that can stack up to thousands of dollars. I knew I could make that much more affordable. So I built my Amazon Interview Wiz Academy, which is a digital course that's about 90% less than getting the same information from a one-to-one. I will give you a freebie on that if you stay until the end. I have my YouTube channel, 2.5 hours of pure, specific, actionable advice. No fluff, no repetition, no general nonsense that you have to wade through, straight to the point. And then I do these live sessions also. And I'm going to have a request for you a little bit later on in the session to see if I can make these even more useful for you. Right, the way this session is going to work, please do ask me questions in the chat box. I will try and pick the questions that I think are most useful for everybody. I'm not going to be able to answer specific questions on specific role types. So questions like exactly what leadership principles am I going to be tested on for a solutions architect, or exactly what format is my interview going to take. There's huge deviation across the board. And of course, there are about 300 different job families in Amazon. No one person can be a technical expert in all 300. I am absolutely an expert in the process, in the leadership principles, all of the kind of the general things that are relevant to absolutely everybody. You can ask me, I will be able to answer it for you. Other things to note then, as I say, stick around till the end. I have an amazing freebie. I also have in my YouTube channel, if you watch my YouTube channel a lot, I have some support notes. So if you don't want to have to write everything down, if you go to a link in the details section of each of the YouTube videos, there is a link to buy me a coffee where you can purchase the notes that cover the entire channel. And what else do I want to tell you? I think that's it. Please also don't ask me, can you give me general advice? Yeah, YouTube channel, 2.5 hours of it. I think that is everything. So with that said, we are now going to get started. So please do slap your questions down and I will attempt to answer them. We usually run this for about an hour. It obviously depends on how many questions I get. So let's get going. Don't be shy. There are no stupid questions, by the way. Ask whatever you need to ask. I will be honest with you if I really feel I can't answer it. Right, so let's just get going. There's a few new people have arrived since I said hellos. So we have Mohab from Egypt. Excellent. Yeah, Amazon Egypt really just launched, didn't it? I'm seeing lots of stuff on my LinkedIn profile of lots of kind of Amazonians that have launched for Egypt. So that's awesome. They're going to be hiring a lot. Right, let's get going. So first question we have here. So let me just check this out. Yeah. All right, Michelle. So you had your first loop. You felt prepared for the LPs, but you stumbled on the open-ended question. Greatest weakness, why you versus other, why this role? Do LP questions take precedent in debrief? Right. So yes, definitely. So the whole point of these interviews, Michelle, is to gather data on how you perform against the leadership principles. So there will be, and there is, a set of criteria that shows what good looks like for a leadership principle and what not good looks like for a leadership principle. And they're trying to get a barometer, calibrate where you are on what is a 5-point scale effectively for the key leadership principles that they're testing for. That's what your bar raiser is going to be looking for in evidence. Questions like, and I'm going to be brutal here, the questions like, what is your greatest weakness? Why you versus others? they don't tell you information on the leadership principles, and nobody is ever trained when they do the making good hiring decisions in Amazon. No one ever trains interviewers in Amazon to ask questions around what you think your greatest weakness is, because of course that's your view. Doesn't mean it is your greatest weakness. It's just what you think your greatest weakness is. And why you versus others. Well, how could you possibly answer that question accurately? Because you have no idea who anybody else is that is interviewing for the role. So quite frankly, again, that's a pretty useless question, because how do you know? How do you know what everyone else is going to be like who's interviewing for the role? And why you? Well, you might have your opinion on why you, but that's not fact-based evidence on the leadership principles. So if I was a bar raiser and I was looking at those questions and answers, and one of my interviewers wanted to table that data as a reason to hire you or not hire you, I would tell them they couldn't, because unless those particular questions around greatest weakness or why you versus others presented evidence, i.e. you might say in the why you versus other answer, you might pull out an example from your career history, which makes you incredibly fabulous and why you assume that sets you apart from others. That specific example and the evidence from that example, I would consider to be viable in the debrief. But other than that, if you're just giving your opinion on why you're so fantastic and why you're guessing everybody else isn't as fantastic as you, or your opinion on what you think is your greatest weakness, it's not really evidence. So I'd be disappointed as a bar raiser if one of my interviewers had spent a lot of time asking you those questions, because that's not how evidence is supposed to be gathered at an Amazon interview. Now, lots of people obviously join Amazon from other places. They have their own interview style that they bring along, and that can carry over into Amazon. So you do have to be prepared to be flexible in terms of some of these questions that are going to come at you. But in my debrief anyway, Michelle, the answers to those questions, unless you surfaced specific scenarios and evidence from your career history, I wouldn't consider that as viable data. I hope that helps. All right. So moving on. Right. Do we have any more questions as well, guys? We're looking a bit, folks. I'm really trying to work on the language that I use, and I'm so bad at it. So apologies, folks. Please do drop your questions in. Right. Let's see what else we've got. Yep. Jay Pafford, this is definitely a non-tech role that you're asking about. So if anybody's listening to this rather than seeing the comments on the screen, do I know if business analyst is considered technical or non-technical? You think non-technical, even though it's working in SQL or Tableau and the like? Definitely non-tech role, definitely. You will probably experience some type of technical test for them to understand your SQL skills or your Tableau skills, etc. I hate Tableau, by the way. Not a big fan of Tableau, although it's, I think, pretty the analysis tool of choice in Amazon. So it's not considered a tech role at a job family level, but you're probably going to get some technical testing so that they can test your capability and your skill set there. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that one. Let me just do Jay Pafford again. I will get to that one. Vishnupriya. How long is it appropriate to tell the recruiter you need to think about it if you get a job offer? If you're waiting for offers or days away from other final interviews. So I don't think that there is an appropriate length of time. There is the length of time that works for you. I don't feel any recruiter should be forcing you to give them a decision ASAP or in any particular time frame within reason, because it's an important decision. It's an important decision for you. As long as you are being transparent and explaining to them why it is you need time, then a good recruiter will say to you, okay, that's fine. That makes sense. We do have other candidates coming up, but we've offered to you. Take the time that you need. A good recruiter will. Amy Miller, she'll talk about this one all the time. She's an Amazon recruiter, by the way. I have heard, obviously, of recruiter stories where they say, I must have an answer in 24 hours. So, Jay Pafford, what I would say to you is be transparent. Tell them that you're waiting to hear back from other roles. You expect to hear back from those other roles by X date, and therefore you would like to be able to wait until you've got those other offers. Now, if you're very early on in the interview process with another party and you haven't even made it past, I don't know, stage 2, or you're just about to go to interview, then, asking them to wait for that doesn't make a lot of sense. If you've done a final stage for another organization and you're expecting to hear back in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, then I think it'd be reasonable to say to your recruiter, I'm waiting to hear back. It's going to be a week. Can you hold out for a week? And see what they say. Whether there isn't an appropriate, there's no timeline that I can tell you is the best timeline. You're just going to have to play it by ear based on your situation and the recruiter situation. If the recruiter doesn't have anybody else in the pipeline and you're the only person that's looking like a good prospect for the role, then they're going to feel very differently about how long they're willing to give you, or comfortable giving you, should I say, versus if they've got a steaming hot pipeline and they've got other candidates coming up behind you really, really quickly, then they might take a different view. So I think you're just going to have to deal with it on a bit of a case-by-case basis. I hope that helps. I know it's a bit of a non-answer, but hopefully in being a non-answer, it's useful. Okay. Yeah, Vostro, tell me about yourself question. If it's asked by every interviewer in the loop, the answer being very similar every time, is it bad? So by the time you get to loop, the tell me about yourself question isn't really very relevant. Lots of hiring managers are going to use that narrative that you share in the tell me about yourself question to really take a view on your career history, your skill set. What have you done in the past that's going to be relevant and connected to this role? And it's quite useful in the early stages. Once you get through to loop, the data that they're gathering per what I was saying earlier on to Michelle is all about the leadership principles. And are you presenting the evidence for the leadership principles, and how are you calibrating against those leadership principles? The answers that you'll give to the tell me about yourself question aren't really going to align to the leadership principles. You might talk about a couple of key projects that you're really, really proud of. That might surface a bit of data for the leadership principles. But essentially, those aren't the important questions that your team, your interviewing team, and your bar raiser are going to be considering for evidence. In the main, tell me about yourself by the time you get to loop is a warm-up question, because it's a weird situation. You don't know these people. You may not even ever work directly with these people, particularly if you're a bar raiser like I was, but you may be someone from an adjacent team who never going to work with this person again, or at least are going to work with them infrequently. You walk into a room, not anymore, turn on a screen, and there's a complete random stranger there. So you have to have a warm-up question, and tell me about yourself is very much used as a bit of a warm-up question for your interviewer to relax you, and also just kind of get a few little cues for them to work with through the interview. So I would always ask questions like, tell me about why we're here. Why is it that this job interests you? I never used that data to make my decision on whether I wanted to be inclined or not inclined for a candidate. But I definitely used their response to create a bit of a barometer for myself in terms of how I'm going to play the rest of the interview out. So if they're very quiet and held back in their response, I know that I've got some decisions I have to make in my head about how I'm going to manage that interview moving forward. Opposite, if they are very vocal and they talk a lot and they give me a 10-minute response to that question, I know I've got someone who is over talking, and I'm going to have to manage them very, very closely when it comes to the rest of the interview. So I would say to you, it's fine to use the same answer over and over and over again, because it shouldn't really be used for evidence in your debrief. And how many different things have you got to tell yourself about anyway? How would you come up with 5 different answers or 6 different answers for 6 different people? So keep it short, give them the basics, bit of a overview of your very recent, your recent history, maybe a couple of projects that you just think are the things that really stand out for you and why it is that you feel that connects you to this role and why you'd be great for this role, and then stop. Because really you want to spend no more than a minute answering that question so your interviewer can get onto the key point of the interview, which is either the technical competencies or the behavioral questions. I hope that helps, Fostro. Okay, moving on then. Next question. How easy is it to negotiate oh, hang on, sorry, I've got to put that up there. How easy is it to negotiate salary? That's going to depend. It's going to depend on the first offer that they give you, really. So sometimes you'll be in a situation where you've shared your expectations. Your expectations are very high in terms of the actual salary bands that are available, and your recruiter may have already done an incredible job getting you the very, very best comp that they can possibly get you for your offer, in which case getting anything more might be trickier. On the other hand, if your expectations were a little bit lower and what the recruiters managed to come up with for you is a bit more on the middle of the road, you might have more leeway to actually get more. So my recommendation is always try to negotiate. Before you get into the process materially, have the conversation with your recruiter about what your expectations are. Once you're in round two, ideally before round one, actually, but if you've gone past round one, once you're at round two, definitely start talking to your recruiter about your salary expectations. Do your research, find out what the band, kind of the range is within your market, have that data with you, have your view of what your bottom line is, what would make you walk away from this job, and have a view of what your goal is. And then once you get into your negotiations, work to your goal, know your bottom line, and then you will have some confidence in when and where you're going to say yes or no. Try a negotiation after the first offer, and then you're going to have to read your recruiters, not body language, obviously, but their response to give you a sense of really how far can I go with this. I'm personally not a fan of the massive backwards and forwards between a candidate and the recruiter to try and get a few more dollars out of the whole thing. It's usually not worth it. If you are going to negotiate, my best advice is that you do it on RSUs, which is the stock. They're going to be much, much more willing to be flexible on the RSUs than they will be on base or bonus. Plus, just from a basic economics point of view, every dollar that you get on your salary that they commit to giving you for next year, by the time you get to next year, that dollar, I'm just using dollar as a kind of universal currency. I realize you may not be in dollars. Every dollar that you agree to this year that you get next year is going to be worth less next year because of inflation. Every dollar in RSUs that you agree to get next year that you get next year, given the history of Amazon, is very likely to be worth more than $1. So that's the way I think about it. Focus on the RSUs for the negotiation. Okay, so let's see what other questions we have here. Now, just scrolling to see what else we have. Please do drop your questions in. Any more questions, everybody? We're a little bit light today. All right, I'm going to do this one. So, some example questions for Earn Trust Leadership Principle. Okay, so I cannot on air broadcast to you the specific questions that are in the Amazon interview question bank for any of the leadership principles. The reason why I can't do that is that document is a confidential document that is covered by the confidentiality agreement that I signed when I joined Amazon. So I cannot tell you what those leadership principle, those questions are. You can do a search online and you will get close in terms of what those questions are. Some are complete nonsense that you'll find online. And I do have a YouTube video about which ones are nonsense, and some are more accurate. So I can't give you the specific ones, but let me give you an interpretation of an earned trust question. So there are different facets of earned trust. And if you sign up to get my free Customer Obsession Masterclass, which I'm going to give you away at the end, you'll see what I mean by different facets. So there are different facets of earned trust, but in one particular facet, the type of question that you might get might be something about a time where you were trying to get the cooperation of somebody and they didn't want to cooperate. How did you deal with it? So that might be an example of earning trust, because clearly in that example, you need something, somebody else doesn't want to do it. You're going to have to find a way to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. So that's an example of earned trust. There might be another example or another question, maybe about bad relationships. So you could get a question around, give me an example of a time where you had a disagreement with somebody. How did you deal with that disagreement and how did you resolve it? So in that example, there's a bad relationship and they're trying to understand how you build bridges, is the name of the facet as I articulate it in my masterclasses. How do you build bridges with people when those bridges have been burned and you have a bad relationship? How do you rebuild them out? So again, those are a couple of examples for you. They're based on the facets of the leadership principles that I have broken down for every single leadership principle, all 16 of them now. I've released my two new leadership principle masterclasses a couple of days ago. And if you understand the facets, then it won't matter what question you're actually asked in the interview, because every single question that you'll get in the Amazon interview aligns to every single one of the facets that I have identified in my masterclasses. So if you understand the facets, when you're in the interview and you're asked a question, you'll have an example in your head that matches that question because you'll have prepared an example for the facets. And what you won't have to do, which is just the root of all disasters when it comes to Amazon interviewing, is sit there going, what leadership principle, what words did they use? What does that match up to? Okay, I'm going to guess that they are talking to me about have backbone, disagree and commit. Now I'm just going to roll out my example for have backbone, disagree and commit. That's a road to disaster, trying to guess the leadership principle, because if you guess the wrong one, you won't answer the question. So you must focus on answering the question. The best way to always have an example for the question is to have an example for each of the facets. Once you have that in your little Rolodex, I'm very old, mental Rolodex, when you get asked the question, you will have an example that matches the question. So I hope those two help to give you some kind of a sense of the different types of questions that you'll get on earned trust. As I say, I cannot give you the AI QB. I cannot tell you the specific questions, but if you do a trawl online, you'll get quite a good sense of the different types of questions that you might get. And any of them that you see that look ridiculous, ignore. Or watch my video about the ones that I found that were ridiculous, just for a laugh, if nothing else. Okay, I hope that was helpful. What other questions do we have? Okay. So I can't see any more questions appearing. So what I'm now going to say is I've been doing these sessions, these Q&As for 6 months odd now, and they're very open, and I just invite people on to ask any questions, and generally I can answer pretty much most questions other than tell me the specific questions in the AI QB. But I'm now at the point where I'm wondering, is there any other way that I can help you? I obviously do all of my videos on my YouTube channel. I haven't done one for a while. I've been on vacation. I've been redecorating, but I will start another one tomorrow. And I try and come up with videos that I believe will be useful because they're based generally on the questions that people are asking me here and now, or stuff that I see on social media. But I'm wondering whether there's any other format that might also be helpful to you. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, please do like the stream on YouTube. It makes a big difference to my visibility on YouTube. Give me a little something back for what I give you would be awesome. But when you finish this live, please have a think about, is there any other format that you would like to see me use for these live sessions. So I could do a deep dive on a particular topic for a particular live session and tell you all about one particular thing that is something that you're really concerned about or curious about. So if there's anything along those lines that you're seeing that you're not seeing in my YouTube channel and you would like me to be able to do a live session on specifically so that you can ask questions back and forth, please do put a comment in this particular live once I've got it posted. Comment in that, and then I will look at that information and then have a think about whether there's any other format or content that would be really useful for you in these Q&A sessions. Okay, so that said, let me just see if there are any new questions that have popped up. Okay, yeah, okay. So how many examples do I suggest you should prepare for an L5 level role? So you've got about 4 years of experience. So based on kind of an average of what would be brilliant examples that you could probably come up with in the space of a year, I reckon you should probably aim for 10 to 12 examples if you can. Now, obviously, by the time you get to loop, you'll be asked way more questions than that. You know, if you're imagining at a loop, you've got 5 interviewers on average. If it's an L5 role, I think you probably find yourself being asked 4 questions per interviewer. So that's 20 questions just for loop. You'll have had to get to loop. So that'll be, imagine you do the worst case scenario, 2 early rounds. So that's another 4. So that's 28 questions. That's a lot of questions, but at an L5 level, they're much more comfortable about you repeating examples. So get yourself 10 to 12 examples and then find ways to spin those 10 to 12 examples for different leadership principles. So build them as 2 different star or starry, as I like to say. Again, look at my YouTube channel for a video called The Hidden Amazon Leadership Principle that will tell you why I recommend STRAI rather than STAR. Build 2 different versions for each example, leaning heavily into one leadership principle for one version and another leadership principle for another. Then, although you've only got 10 to 12 examples, you'll actually have 24 examples. And maybe if you have an awesome example, you might be able to get 3 leadership principles out of it. I do have a good example of how you can do that using one example and 2 different leadership principles in my interview preparation masterclass, if you're interested. Okay, I hope that's helpful for you. Okay. Okay, so just quickly, how would I pronounce that? Zuzu? That be Zuzu? I don't know. So I cannot actually answer this question for you. So what are my thoughts on an AWS certification for a college student looking for internships? So what do I think? It's always worth getting qualifications if you can. It certainly shows learn and be curious, which is super important for AWS, particularly if you're in kind of engineering roles, coding roles, all of those types of things. Personal development and learning is really important. So if you can, I personally think it's always worth getting yourself a qualification, a certification. How important it is in the hiring criteria for whoever's going to be hiring in AWS for whatever role it is that you're applying for as an internship, that I cannot speak to. That's not within the scope of what I would have done as a bar raiser. So general principle, it's always worth getting qualifications. How much it will influence the outcome for you, I could not say. Okay, moving on then. Yep, that's perfect. Right, so Kim, so you have a question related to, welcome by the way, Kim. Should have said that before. I should have said welcome to everybody who I did questions for. Okay, so related to customer obsession, can you use an example where you work with internal stakeholders? You worked in finance, so didn't have much experience dealing with external customers. Yes, absolutely, you can use internal customers. There are so many roles in Amazon or pretty much in any organization where you don't deal with external customers. So using internal customers is absolutely fine. I would say to you, Kim, please do take what I'm going to be offering you relatively shortly, which is my Customer Obsession Masterclass. It's completely free, but if you have a look at that, it will help you get your head around why it is okay to use internal customers. I've got a couple of examples in there which absolutely speak to that internal customer scenario. So a customer, as far as Amazon is concerned, is anybody who is dependent on your output. So I worked with incredible finance people, actually. I was super lucky. And if you get a finance role in Amazon, brilliant, because they are damn smart people doing damn interesting things, far more interesting than any finance people in any other company I've worked in. I was their customer because a lot of what I needed to do, building business cases, building monthly business reports, quarterly business reports, all those things, I had to use a finance person. So I would have been their customer, and therefore they would have at their interview talked about the types of relationships and customers that they were working with in marketing, as a marketer, etc. So that's absolutely fine. Please do check out my Customer Obsession Masterclass. I promise it will really help you. Okay. All right. Hey, Leon. Welcome. What can you do if you get stuck with a question that you might have prepared, but you're not certain at the moment? All right. So I'm going to cover off two scenarios for you, Leon. So the first one is where you go blank. Okay. Now, this happened to me in my interview with a VP. I was completely blank. First of all, admit it. Say, I'm very sorry. I've literally gone blank. Can I please just have a second? They'll say yes. Get some water, compose yourself, and try and get your brain back in gear. I strongly recommend that people take notes into their interview. And when I say notes, I mean a few bullet points written on a piece of paper. Do not write it on your screens. Because if you write it on your screens, what happens is people look over here, they start scrolling, you see their eyes going round and round and round. They put too much data on the screen, and it absolutely doesn't work from an interview perspective. But a few bullet points, sorry, I just hit my microphone. A few bullet points on a piece of paper that when you compose yourself, Leon, you can just look down at, refresh your memory, and get going again. I do recommend warning your interviewer that you have some notes with you, but that you absolutely are not going to be reading off them and you'll only reference them lightly is a good thing to do. So that's scenario number one, Leon, where you've just gone a little bit blank, but you were well prepared. Scenario number two is going to be where you actually don't know how to answer the question. Some of the questions that come through in an Amazon interview are really specific questions, and you may never have experienced that particular thing. And the examples that you prepared just can't flex to that particular question. In that scenario, this is my suggestion. If you have something that's slightly like it, you think it's kind of the answer, but not quite, explain to your interviewer, I have an example, I'm not quite sure if it meets what you want. This is what it is. And give them literally a minute. This is the only time I ever recommend people give 1 minute answers. Give them a minute of the scenario. Is that going to work for you? They will tell you if it will or won't. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. If it won't, it's because that little thing that you realize is not quite right is not quite right. If they say to you, no, that's not going to work for me, then, or indeed, if you haven't got anything that you think is even close to being appropriate, my recommendation is you say, I'm really sorry. I don't feel I have a strong example for that question. I don't want to waste my opportunity or your time. So could I please have another question? It's absolutely fine to ask for another question in an Amazon interview. Don't do it too many times, because if you do it too many times, they're going to be worried that you don't have a good enough bank of high-performing examples. but once or twice through a loop is absolutely okay. Better that than waste your interviewer's time giving them either a rubbish answer, which you know is not showcasing you in the best way it possibly could, or the wrong answer, which will just be a complete waste of their time when they realize at the end you haven't answered the question, which happens regularly, I promise you. Okay, I hope that helps, Leon. I hope that answers your questions. Maybe I give you a little something extra. Okay. Can you apply for an Amazon? Apply again if you failed third round this week. Can you apply again and attend the interview in the next week? Okay, so you're very unlikely. Okay, let me break this down into two parts for you, Ajith. So if you can apply again immediately, will be dependent on the feedback that you get from your recruiter. So you've got all the way to loop. So what you should be able to get is feedback enough from your recruiter to find out whether you were a not inclined, no recycle, which means they thought you were a pretty long way from being bar raising. In which case, if you're a no recycle, they should also tell you whether there's a moratorium against you applying again anytime soon. If they don't say it, ask, is when can I apply again? Or you could be a not inclined recycle. And that's where you're almost there, but not quite. Maybe it wasn't your day, or maybe you just aren't strong in the key leadership principles that they care the most about in that role. If you're a not inclined recycle, then generally you can apply again immediately, and you can put your application in as soon as you close the email or hopefully get off the phone from the recruiter. Could you have an interview in the next week? Or maybe you were talking about applying in the next week. There's no way you'll be at interview the next week for a role that you apply for this week. The process won't work that fast. Could you apply the next week? If you're a not inclined recycle, for sure, absolutely. Check with your recruiter. Like when they come back to you, say, when they give you the outcome, ask, am I able to apply again immediately? Just ask those words, and then they'll tell you whether you've got a moratorium or whether you're free to do that. I hope that helps. Okay, next question then. Hey, you again, Suzu. Okay, so when you're asked the question to introduce yourself, is it proposed that you should integrate the leadership principles, or is that overkill? So I'm not sure if I have a video on my YouTube channel that specifically deep dives into tell me about yourself. My suggestion is that you avoid spending too much time on tell me about yourself, because the truth is you don't actually know what the interviewer is looking for in the tell me about yourself question. It's so vague. It's so unspecific. I hate it, which is why I don't use it. And I'm never keen on my interviewers spending too much time on it. So my suggestion is take a view of what you want tell me about yourself to do for you. If you want it to be able to showcase how you are a good fit for this role, then build your tell me about yourself about that. If you want to use it as an opportunity to talk a bit about key leadership principles that you know are the key leadership principles for your role, then focus it on that. If you spend too much time on telling a giant story with tons of detail on the leadership principles, then it may well be overkill, because maybe all that interviewer wanted, if I was to ask that question as an example, is just a brief intro to get to know you and understand and gauge your interview style. And then you've just gone off and given me a whole ton of things, and I didn't want to know those things. I have a whole bank of questions I want to ask you. So it's a bit of a judgment call. My recommendation, keep it short, 1 minute, have a view as how you want to use that time and stick with that. And then if the interviewer doesn't want that, or they start to hurry you up, you know you've gone off and you probably just need to close the whole thing down. That's the best advice I can give you, because it's not an official question that has an official purpose in the Amazon interview structure. Okay. Mahab, yes, I will put the link to my masterclasses at the end. So make sure you hang around for the next 15 minutes or so, and the link will be there for you. Okay. Okay. Karthik. Oh, I'm glad you like my content. And good. I'm glad you've learned a lot. You need tips on the best state of mind an L6 candidate should carry into interview, especially L5. So I don't think there's an answer to this question. I'm sure you'll see loads of content from career coaches telling you what specific state of mind you should be in. The truth is, different people are different. I function much better when I am excited and hyped up, etc. I know, I'll use my husband as an example. He needs to be calm. He needs to be steady. You have to know yourself, Karthik. How do you function optimally? When are you firing on all cylinders? When do you do your best work? Under what circumstances do you do your best work? And then that's the state of mind you need to get yourself into ahead of the interview. There's no right way. There's only the right way for you. So spend some time in your interview preparation time reflecting on the times where you have done an incredible job, when you were in a meeting and you left the meeting and thought, I nailed it. Or when you did a project and you did an outstanding job. Think about the context that you were in when you delivered your best work. That's the context you need to create for yourself when you're going into your Amazon interview, or indeed any interview. That's my best advice for you, Karthik. Good luck. What else have we got? Oh, so you used my tip about writing down the question. So the reason why I've put this up here for the rest of you is this is my best tip. This is the tip that 90% of people who contact me and say thank you mention this particular tip. And speaking to many other interviewers and bar raisers, the biggest mistake that candidates make is not answering the question. Link slightly back to my point earlier about sitting there and trying to guess which leadership principle and then guessing the wrong one. But when you're under pressure and when you're in the moment, it is so easy to go off track. So easily done. From the most junior to the most senior people, it's so easily done. And the worst thing for an interviewer is for someone to not answer the question that you've asked. So when somebody asks you a question, write it down. Say to your interviewer, can I just have a couple of seconds to write down the question? They should say yes. There's no reason for them to say no. Then you should actually write it down. That serves a couple of purposes. The first is you've written down the question, so you can check as you go through the interview that you haven't gone off course. The second thing it does is it gives you time to process the question, to really think about what you're being asked. There will be certain keywords in there that will help you connect that question to your Rolodex of examples that you have in your head. And the third thing it will do is it will give you time to think about the answer that you're about to give. Now, obviously, that's a lot to happen. The human brain processes incredibly fast. So in nanoseconds, you should be able to go through those 3 different stages mentally. And that will make sure you answer the question. It will make sure you've had time to prepare for the question. Lift your head back up, and then you can move forward. The other thing I will say, and I haven't put this tip in my YouTube channel, but I think I will now, is you should repeat the question back to your interviewer. So you've written it down, look up and go, right. So a time when I had a disagreement with a colleague and what did I do about it? So they've said it to you. You've written it down, you've repeated it back to them. Again, it gives you more thinking time to process and structure your STARI, and you also make sure that you're answering the question that you were asked. So thank you so much for putting that there. Give me a chance to share it with everybody. If that's the only thing you ever take out of my channel, all 2.5 hours of it, it will still be a big game changer for you. So thank you very much for putting that up there. And good luck. You've got your virtual loop next week. Fingers crossed. Come back and let us know how it goes on. Okay, what else do we have? Right, so I'm just going to read this one. Okay, I'm not sure I understand this one, Ajith. I'm going to pop that up and see if I read it out loud, if that will process better with my brain. You applied for an Amazon job for a different role after failing in the 3rd round on a different role. Okay, so you failed at Loop and got an opportunity to give the interview and gave your 2nd round of interview. Any issue with this? So I'm not sure I understand the question exactly, but suffice to say, if you didn't make it through on another role and you're now being interviewed again for a 2nd role, there's no issue, right? They've seen the notes from your first interview experience and they still think it's worth interviewing you again for this role. It's all good. So I don't see any issues, but maybe I haven't quite understood your question, Ajith. So if I haven't got it nailed properly, feel free to ask again and I will try again. Awesome. This is such a good question. Zuzu, thank you so much for asking this question. This is one of my favorite questions. So what sort of questions should you be asking when the interviewer asks if you have any questions for them? Right. The world is divided. Maybe it's divided with every other career coach and interview coach and me, or maybe there's a few more people in my camp. I don't know. But I have a very particular view on this. And my view is that you should be focusing the question time that you have with your interviewers on asking the questions that you need the answers to make a good decision about whether this is the company you want to work for, the role you want to do, the team you want to work with, the hiring manager you want to work for. Those question times are the only opportunities you have to gather that data, because at the end of this, if you are made an offer, you have to decide, do I quit my possibly nice and stable, quite adequate job that I have at the moment and go somewhere completely new, different, new people, new role, new environment? It's a risk. If you're going to take a risk, you have to take it based on gathering data. That's what Amazon does. So I believe you should focus that time on gathering the data. So decide what questions you want to ask that will give you the data that you need to know. There will be different questions that different people want to ask. My interview preparation masterclass has a whole list of them, but to someone it might matter the flexibility of working hours. So they might ask that question. For somebody else, it might matter more what their manager's kind of preferred working style is. So they might focus on those. So you have to decide what type of data points are going to help you decide whether this is the right role for you. Now, you're going to be meeting different people. So you have to think contextually about who it is you're talking to. So there's no point in asking someone who isn't the hiring manager about how flexible the working hours are, because that's going to be up to your hiring manager. So only ask that question to your hiring manager. If you want to understand more general questions about what it's like to work at Amazon, you can ask your bar raiser, because they will know nothing about the team, they will know nothing about the work, but they'll know a lot about what it's like to work at Amazon. If you want to know about the technology that the team are using, because the type of technology, it matters to you and is interesting to you, then you can ask one of your peers, one of the interviewers who's in your peer group and maybe works for the hiring manager as well, because they'll be able to answer those questions. So you just need to think about what are the key things that would help you decide if this is the job that you want to take, and who is the right people in your interview loop to ask those questions to. I am not an advocate for using that time to ask really challenging questions around the role, the team, the organization in a attempt to make yourself sound really smart. If you haven't achieved that in answering through the behavioral questions, if you haven't managed to achieve that in showing them that you raise the bar on the leadership principles, then no amount of smart questions in that question time is going to save you. You need to use that time to make one of the biggest decisions you'll make at this point in your life. That is my particular view, not shared by everybody, but then, hey, most people have different opinions about most things. This is just based on me as a hiring manager, me as a candidate, and me as a bar raiser. I hope that helps. Okay, moving on then. Yeah, Franco, so how many years experience is it worth talking about? And tell me about yourself. You've got more than 15 years of experience. So again, you've got to decide how you want to use tell me about yourself and what are the key points you want to make and how can you make them in a minute. Seriously, I do not suggest you spend any more than a minute on tell me about yourself. So if you want to talk about your, if you want to talk about your career history, spend more time on the more recent ones, spend very little time on the ones way back yonder. So if you've got 15 years of experience and you've decided you want to answer, tell me about yourself by giving them a trot through your career history, then I would just be talking about maybe the past 3-4 years, the roles that you were in for the past 3 or 4 years, and a couple of projects that you thought were important projects that help epitomize who you are, what you are, or how it connects with this current role, and then very briefly summarize up how you found yourself going into those particular roles in the more recent past. So don't go back decades and decades and decades. It's irrelevant. If you want to focus on your career history, really the roles that they'll care the most about are the ones that you did in the last 3 to 4 years. Anything before that is ancient history, really. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, let's have a look, see where we have got 3 minutes left. So let me see what. Okay, good, Ajith. It sounds like I gave you the right answer that you were looking for. I'm glad. Okay, Mahesh. Do you have to go through all the stages for the same position in another country? Your final loop got cancelled. You got pipped to the post. That's unfortunate. And they're looking for an international location. So there's no actual rock solid rule set for this scenario. It does vary quite a lot. The new team in the international location will look at your notes, dependent on how well they feel that the previous role matches exactly to the role that they're looking for. So, for example, a product manager role, I'm just making this up because Mahesh, I don't know which role it is, but a product manager role can vary enormously between different units. A product manager role in Kindle could be so different from a product manager in Amazon Air, let's say. So it will depend on how closely the roles actually match. And it will also depend on the confidence levels of the team in the other location in terms of how they feel about the team in the first location. If the teams are really closely aligned, they know each other really well, they know the scope of the roles are really similar, possibility is they might just take you straight in to loop. Equally, the possibility is that they might want to interview you again from scratch. There's no one rule. I'm afraid you're just going to have to wait and see. Okay, so I'm sorry that was no real answer for you, but there's so much variation in the Amazon processes these days. It used to be much more solid and clear cut when I interviewed at Amazon 6 years ago now, but now there's a lot more deviation, a lot more leeway for managers to make decisions that are right decisions for their team, which I think to a degree is the right thing to do. Okay, I think we are now at time. So I promised I would give you the link to my academy. So this is the link to, I never get this right. I never go in the right direction. Oh, I have now. From there to there, the AmazonInterviewWizAcademy.com. So AmazonInterviewWizAcademy.com. If you go there, you will be able to get my Customer Obsession Masterclass completely free. It includes the 4 facets of the Customer Obsession Leadership Principle. It includes great detail about what behaviors the interviewer is looking for in your customer obsession example. And there's a mock interview there as well, so you can see how you can go about landing those behaviors in an interview. I give it to you because, of course, I want you to love it. Buy some more of my product, but also because I plan to give one leadership principle away, the best one I can give is customer obsession, because every single one of you, I promise, if you make it through to the final stages of Amazon interview, you will get asked customer obsession. So given that I'm giving one away, if I give customer obsession, everyone gets value. So please do go grab yourself that leadership principle masterclass. I promise you, you will absolutely love it. Okay, so we are now at time. So I'm going to let you guys go. Again, if you would like to see anything specific in these sessions other than just a standard Q&A, please do just drop in the comments of this Q&A something, the information that you want to share with me, and I can have a look at it and use that as some guidance to how to make this stuff even more useful to you guys. There'll also be a link to the masterclass in a few hours when I've done the editing on this. So thank you very much, everybody. If you have an interview coming up, I wish you the very, very best of luck. And that's it. Take care. It's still a mad world out there, so please be safe. And thank you very, very much for joining today. Great questions. Take care.